Welcome to the Accounting for Sustainability International Case Competition Information Session. My name is Zhou, and I am an MBA student at the NUS Business School, which is one of the organizers of this case competition. I am joined by Nishant, who is also an MBA student at the NUS Business School. Nishant, I'm going to say hello to everyone.
Hey guys, welcome to the info session.
And we are also here with James Williams and Hannah Brockfield, who are from A4S. James and Hannah, if you want to say hello to everyone.
Hi everyone. Yeah, James here. Obviously, welcome to the information session. Really happy to have you on board with us today.
Okay, so James will introduce more about accounting for sustainability and our sponsors in later session, and we'll answer some of your questions during the Q&A session. So during this information session, if you have any questions, you can just type it in the chat box, or at the end, we will have a Q&A session. At that time, you can unmute yourself freely and ask what you want to know. Okay, now let's move on to what is A4S ICC. The A4S International Case Competition, A4S ICC, has been designed to connect the brightest financial, entrepreneurial, and technical student minds, which is you, I believe, of tomorrow, with the business and executives who are shaping the world today, which is our panel of judges and consists of startup founders and C-suite executives of Canada's biggest institutional investors. Our vision for the competition is to provide a platform for students to develop creative solutions and ideas that could solve sustainability challenges and shape the business of the future. Okay, now let's talk a little more about the history of this case competition. This year, we launched the A4S ICC for the 5th time. So you see, we have been around for almost half a decade already. We started off in 2018. In 2018, the challenge was to making cities more sustainable, and the winners were from Indian School of Business. Their solution is about incorporated hemp and concrete to build buildings. And in 2019, our challenge was to scale up our challenge was to find innovative technology to increase sustainability. And the winner's solution is about capturing methane to produce electricity from that. In 2020, our challenge was about to scale up sustainable finance. And the winner's solution was an online platform for retail investors that enabled investment exclusively in sustainable businesses. And in 2021, considering the impact of COVID, our challenge is about to increase supply chain resilience in the light of the pandemic. Winners were from HEC Montreal, who proposed the digital marketplace to local fish ecosystems. So what is the important information here? As you can see, we state first and second places on this slide, and the winners are from different countries every year. As you might know, the first place gets 10,000 Canadian dollars, and the second place gets 5,000 Canadian dollars. Besides the cash prize and of course the experience, I guess there is also another reason why teams participate. To explain on that, let me share with you about the idea of the winning team of 2020. When they were brainstorming about their idea, they conducted user research and interviewed about 70 millennials across the globe to find out what holds people back to invest sustainably. They formed an idea and prototyped and built a business model based on that extensive market research. Then they used this case competition to pressure test their startup idea. Not surprisingly, they got the first place and won $10,000. But they did not stop here. They went on, asked one of the judges, who happened to be a startup founder himself, to mentor them and actually launched the idea. Today, 2 years later, their business is still around, though they made a few twists. Briefly, they made their idea come into reality. As this story from winning team from 2020 shows, you never know where this case competition will get you to. So the key takeaway here is don't think of this case competition as the one-time event that ends after this case competition. Rather, think of it as the stage where you can try out and pressure test different new business ideas. And when it actually culminates in launching a business in one way or the other, great. That means this case competition is actually making some impact on the real world. So now let's move on to our agenda today. Today, I will invite James to introduce more about the A4S and our sponsors. And then I will talk a little bit more on our case topic this year. And then we will introduce about the timeline and deliverables for each phase. And also the organizing members from Rotman Business School, actually they were participants of the case competition last year. So they had some experiences already. And we will deliver some of their insider information later on. And then we will have some advice from past teams. And we will conclude with a Q&A session. But for now, let's hear from James about A4S and our sponsors. James, I'll pass it on to you. Thank you.
Brilliant. Yeah, thank you for that, Joanna. And yeah, hello, everybody. My name's James Williams, and I'm a project officer at A4S. Really happy to have you on board, as I said earlier, but I'm the person who is fortunate to work on this case competition this year for you all. I guess what I want to start off with is to talk a little bit about what A4S is, what our aims are, who we reach out to, what type of networks we support, what networks support our work, and of course, what type of work we do. So as you can see on your screens there, A4S was started in 2004 by His Royal Highness, the Prince of Wales, to inspire action by finance leaders to really drive a fundamental shift towards a resilient business model and a sustainable economy. Also, to add on to that, to help ensure that we're not battling to meet 21st century challenges with at best 20th century decision-making and reporting systems. But not only that, to make sustainable business business as usual. So going on to the aims of A4S, they are, as you can see by that graph there, to inspire finance leaders to adopt sustainable and resilient business models, to transform financial decision-making, to enable an integrated approach reflective of the opportunities and risks posed by environmental and social issues, and to scale up action by integrating sustainability through the role of finance and the accounting community. All of the aforementioned really playing a big part in the spine and foundation of this year's case topic on achieving net zero. So this is more the exciting bit, the A4S network. We have the CFOs and their finance team, who represent 200 plus countries and over $2.2 trillion in total assets, of which our CFO leadership network spans Europe, Canada, and the US, and obviously rather excitingly, the APAC region joining the fold here too, more recently. We've got circles of practice that go even further, as far as Brazil, New Zealand, Australia, and Singapore. We've got the Accounting Bodies Network, who represents 2/3 of the world's accountants, or around 2.5 million accountants across 181 countries, if you want to be specific. And the Asset Owners Network, who represents 40 chairs of pension funds with, $450 billion of assets under management, which is quite a lot. All of these who really support and are behind this competition and really want to not only see it work, but I guess see its outputs inspire and contribute in making a difference. And yet there's more. These logos, of which I'm sure many will be familiar to you, are just some of the members of the A4S CFO Leadership Network who have been convened to show and drive leadership in building environmental and social considerations into the strategy and business process of some of the world's largest organizations. I'm sure you'd agree. Once again, all are large drivers and contribute to a lot of A4S activities outputs, including this competition. So yeah, as you can see in front of you, now that we've covered a little bit of what A4S is, I'll kind of get into the introduction about the competition itself. So this year's competition will be focusing, as I said, on achieving net zero. And that's something Joanna will go into a little bit more detail with you all in a little bit. In addition, here on this slide, you'll see the sponsors for our competition this year. We have Brookfield Asset Management, Ontario Teachers Pension Plan, as well as CPA Canada. We'll also be fortunate enough to have representatives from each of these sponsoring organisations, as well as A4S Executive Chair Jessica Fries, participate as final round judges for this year's competition. Further to that, I guess, in line with the case topic this year, all the sponsoring organisations are individually committed to net zero emissions in a number of ways. You've got Brookfield Asset Management, who has a global transition fund to support that transition. OTPP, or Ontario Teachers Pension Plan, uses their position of leadership within their portfolio and across the world to further support that mission. And CPA Canada develops thought leadership and guidance on the matter. A little bit more, I guess, on achieving net zero, as I'm sure many of you are aware, this topic is really relevant at this time, as the world prepares for and actions the outcomes from this year's UN COP26 meetings taking place in Glasgow a mere few weeks away from now in November, or a week away, in fact, as around 70% of the world economy is now covered by net zero targets. Further, it aligns to the Race to Zero global campaign to rally leadership and support for net zero that includes a coalition of around, I think, 733 cities across 31 regions and even more businesses and higher education institutions across the globe. So really is pertinent that we look at it now. If you're interested in this case competition or of anything else of what has been already stated by myself or Joanna, then I encourage you to look at the practical guidance that A4S produces for finance professionals, as well as the Knowledge Hub and Essential Guide series on the website. An example of these guidance documents, which is also particularly relevant for the case this year, is the Net Zero Cross-Sector and Banking Guides, which you can see on your screen now, along with some practical net zero examples. All of these are available on a4s.org. Further, yeah, feel free to subscribe to the newsletter for kind of any more information. So with all that said, I think it's pertinent and prudent to maybe kind of move forward. Thank you, Joanna, and thank you everybody for your interest. This is, as Joanna stated, the 5th year of the ICC, which I think can be considered a bit of a milestone. And we are really looking forward to, yeah, another great competition this year with you all as we build on the wonderful momentum achieved from the previous 4 successful years of the A4S ICC. So yeah, back over to you, Joanna.
Thank you, James. We are now coming to the case topic of this year's competition. Okay, now let's face it, and to be honest, we are in the middle of a climate crisis. In 2015, the United Nations Paris Agreement set out a clear goal, keeping global warming to well below 2 Celsius degrees by 2100, and to strive for maximum 1.5 Celsius degree rise in global average temperatures. 6 years later, we look back on the agreement and have to admit we are not on track to deliver this goal, but the clock is ticking. As a result of the 2015 UN Paris Agreement, many governments across the globe made pledges, plans, and commitments to shift their economies to having net zero carbon emissions until 2050. But how will this road to net zero economies specifically look like? Some critics claim that many countries do not have a feasible roadmap to get to net zero. I remember reading in news when the newly elected US President Joe Biden revealed his roadmap to net zero for the US. Many critics responded that the plan relies partly on magic, which is to say it's not possible and feasible. So how can we create feasible roadmaps to net zero that create positive social impact and a just transition? This is where our case topic comes in. We challenge you to design actionable, measurable, commercial, business, and financial models that reduce greenhouse gas emissions with sustainability at the core of its business strategy. Before we move on to the details of how you can tackle this challenge, let's first look at our overall timeline. So today, here we are, it's October 26th. We are in the second information session. And overall, the case competition is structured into 3 phases: the assessment phase, the semifinals, and the finals. And our applications will be open from November 1st, 2021 until January 14th, 2022. So you have plenty of time to think about if you want to join or not. And then there will be a very long assessment session for over 2 months before the semifinal. The semifinal comes from the 7th to 14th on March 2022. Then before the finals, there will be a live networking session on March 25th. And the finals will be on March 26, 2022. So that's basically the timeline. And you can see actually the assessment phase is very long. So participants may need to make a timeline for yourselves. When will you work on this case? When will you work on this case competition and when not? And we will talk more about this later. Okay, now let's move on to the deliverables for the assessment phase. Okay, so you need to submit an application package by January 14th, 2022, due on Friday. So basically you will need to submit 3 things. The first is an executive summary, which consists of 3 pages with the title page, summary of your solution, and your team outline. And secondly, you need to submit a 5-minute video pitch. You need to use the video pitch to complement your executive summary and convey any other facts, concepts, arguments, and models that did not fit into the executive summary. And the third thing is a consent form for video pitch, because we will put all the videos onto the A4S YouTube page. So that is the whole package you need to submit by January 14th. And if you have any questions about that, you can also leave it in the chat box and we will answer you later. Okay, now let's move to the judging criteria. Basically, there are 8 factors that our judges will look at. The first is the link to case topic, and then the financial viability and the business viability, and also the outline of business value and growth opportunity, and model uniqueness, and the environmental and social impact. And also the supporting data is also important, and your professional presentation and defense of your proposal. And if you want to learn more about the details of the judging criteria, You can find all these details in the student handbook on A4SICC.com. We will tell more about this later. And Nishant, maybe he will share the link for the A4SICC.com and the handbook later in chat box. Okay, now let's move on to the deliverables for semifinals and final. So for semifinals, it will take place from March 17th to 14th, 2022. For semifinals, there will be a 10-minute live virtual presentation. During this presentation, teams will pitch an improved version of their business idea to judges using feedbacks they received from the assessment phase. And then it will follow up with a 15-minute Q&A session. In this Q&A session, teams have opportunity to engage in direct conversation with our judges to provide more context and defend their business proposal. Okay, we will not discuss for so much details for semifinals, but you can also get all the information on our student handbook. Now let's move on to the deliverables for finals. The finals will take place on March 26, 2022. And the deliverables actually is similar to semifinal. It will be a 15-minute live and virtual presentation. This is similar to semifinals, but presentation must be more detailed. And also the financial model for the business must be available in the main deck or as an appendix. And followed by this presentation, there will be a 10-minute Q&A session, which is also similar to semifinals, but the time is shorter. Okay, so that is basically all the deliverables for each stage. And then, as I mentioned before, two of our organizing committee members, actually they had their own experience to take part in the A4S ICC, and they shared some of their advice. And now I will share their information with you. They said that the participating teams should keep in mind for the three things. The first one is you need to plan ahead for the assessment phase. Note that the assessment phase is over 2 months, which is an extraordinarily long time for a case competition. So you need to decide with your team when you will work on the topic and when you will not. You need to define a process for how long will you form the idea. Will you do any interviews with users? When do you start solutioning? When will you write the executive summary and film the video clip? Structure the assessment phase into work streams. So that is the first advice from them. And the second, for your video pitch, you need to think about your audience. You are pitching to startup founders and members of an investment community. Think about it as you would pitch a startup idea to get a seed funding. And the third advice is to use the student handbook. All relevant information on this case competition with guidance on how to develop your proposal and other helpful tips for shooting a great video is available in your student handbook. The student handbook is available on A4SICC.com. And I think Nishant will put the link in the chat box. Okay, with all these three advice, let's also have a look at what other past teams have to say about their learnings. There is one comment says, research your business model extensively. The judges were very knowledgeable and quizzed us on different risks. And another comment is, make sure your financial model is well explained. Judges quizzed us on the sustainability of the models thoroughly. And the third one says that try to build a diverse team with different perspectives. Our team came from work experiences in steel manufacturing, oil and gas, social impact, and investment banking. So that is all the past team's advice and comments on the case competition. And I hope this will help you a little bit on how you can prepare for this case competition. Okay, I think now with this advice, I want to conclude with a big thank you. Thank you for your interest in this case competition. Our introduction is completed already. And in this case competition, if this case competition caught your attention and you are planning to participate, please register for the assessment phase on A4SICC.com. We will send the link through the chat. Also, Nishant, please send the link to the chat box. Thank you. And you can also follow us on Twitter, LinkedIn, or Facebook. You can find our account information in these pages. Thank you so much. Okay, and with that being said, now let's open up to the Q&A session. And check the chat box. If you have anything you want to ask, you can just unmute yourself and say what you want to know. Or if you prefer to type it in the chat box, you can also do that. I see one question in the chat box. So essentially, teams can start working as soon as possible and need to submit everything by 14th January. Nishant, are you going to answer that? Yes, okay. Yes, so your understanding is correct. Is there any other questions, anything you want to know about the timeline, the deliverables, how you can prepare, and how you can form your team? How many people should the team be composed of? Up to 5. And although there's no one asking now, I will say that the 5 members can from different universities. You don't have to be from the same school. Any other questions? Okay. Let's wait for another minute to see if you have any other questions. You can just unmute and or you can type it. We will wait for another 1 minute. If no questions raised, then we will close today's session. Oh, okay, I see there is a hand raised. Please go ahead, Sahil. You can unmute yourself. Yes.
I was just wondering, is there any set structure for this case competition or some kind of format we should be following when setting up for the competition?
So you will get to see the structure and all the details in the student handbook that I pasted on the chat. So if you still have any more questions after going through the handbook, you can just drop us an email as well that I have mentioned in the chat. So that would be helpful for you.
Thank you.
Okay, now okay, I see one more question. If I understand correctly, the queue for 2022 is to build 24/7 of a client in any country, but it will depend on the data consumption and portfolio of the client. I wonder how we can secure that data. James, do you have any idea on how to answer this?
Would you, would you be able to elaborate a little bit with regards to the collation of data there? So are you asking with regards to that particular question of the data consumption, whether you're receiving it from first party or second party sources, or is the question, yeah, I think I would need some kind of a little bit of additional information to kind of answer that correctly. We do have Hannah on board if she does have any kind of insight in this piece, but look, if not, I can endeavor to find out and let you know.
I think on this one, you're not building a case for one client as such. You're building an idea, a business proposal that could be for a single client, but it could be for multiple clients, or for, it doesn't even have to be for a client. I think it would be really useful to look back at, on the website, we have some past winners that can show you the sorts of ideas that people have brought to the table previously. So if you would like to build it for a specific client, then you may want to look into data and the portfolio, but that isn't a prerequisite of the question. But happy to go into more detail separately if that doesn't answer the question.
Okay, Yunjing, is it the answer you want to know? Oh, okay. Okay, maybe you can check more information on our website. Thank you. Okay, if there's no other questions or inquiries, maybe we will close off this session now. And thanks so much for everyone who participated in our info session. And we look forward to seeing all of you in our assessment phase and in the, yes, and hope you can enjoy this case competition and form up your team now. Thank you so much. If you have any other questions, you can always contact us or check some information on the website and the student handbook. Thank you so much. Goodbye.